Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Daring to Transcend. Today, I am super excited to introduce to you Dr. Kasia Gora, who is the co-founder and CTO at Sci-Fi Foods. And we're going to dig into that in just a minute. I'm so excited for you to join us today. Welcome, Kasia, to this week's episode of Daring to Transcend. So before I start to tell you your story, let me just give people a little tidbit of your background. Kasia Gora, PhD, is the co-founder and CTO of Sci-Fi Foods, a food tech company combining cultivated meat with plant-based ingredients to make burgers shockingly close to the taste of conventional beef. Since completing her PhD in biology at MIT, Kasia spent more than a decade working at companies that harness cutting-edge science to create more sustainable solutions for some of the world's most pressing needs. And I'm not going to go through the rest of your bio, but I'm going to just, the end part, which I want to talk about at some point today, is you putting your lab skills to work at home in the kitchen, which I love. My husband is a chemist, so he does the same thing at home, which is always fun. So
we never started out as scale, right?
Huh?
Everyone looks with a scale, right? Because I do. Gravimetric is the way to go for precise measurement, but we can talk about that more later.
I cook with a scale too. My husband likes to wing it though, which works okay with cooking, not so well with baking. So we don't let him bake. But anyway, so when you started out in your career, did you expect to be where you are now?
Where am I now? That's the question. So I think I've always aspired to be a leader. And certainly when I started my career in science, I was hoping to stay in science. So in some ways, yes, I expected to be leading a technical team or a science-based company. I would say I didn't expect to be working in cultivated meat or the food tech space. So my training is much more in the classic biotech synthetic biology and sort of in the course of being in industry and exploring industrial applications of biology, I've sort of come to food tech as a really interesting place to put biological skills to work to really, transform the food system.
Well, I think that's really fascinating. Reading some of your articles about you and your company and the fact that Coldplay is one of your original investors, which I would love.
I don't know any of the band members, sadly, but.
Well, it's still nice. It's still great to have them supporting you.
Yeah, it is great. Yeah, they really care about ESG and they do a lot of investing,
which is really cool. So, the food space, you didn't expect to get here. Tell us what attracts you most about it.
Well, I think in retrospect, it's not actually all that mysterious. So I would say that biology has been a driving force in my life since a young age. In the sense I've always been interested as far as I can remember. I was thinking back about sort of my earliest memories and like, where did this passion for biology come from? And I remember being sort of in early elementary school and my parents and my brother and I were poor Polish immigrants. So my mom used to take us to the public library. During the summer, she would let us rent videos. And apparently, my favorite thing to watch was David Attenborough's Life on Earth, which is like this gigantic mini series documenting the evolution of life on Earth. And I just love that so much. So that's always kind of been there. That's been a passion. I was also really into cooking since a long time ago. So again, my parents were Polish immigrants. So I wanted to rebel and make American food. So at an early age, I was cooking up meatloaf, exotic meatloaf and mashed potatoes for my family, all this American stuff, which was also fun. So I think, it's easy to forget about these passions that really drive micro decisions. But I think ultimately I've just been going towards the things that, are important to me. And when I see an opportunity subconsciously, I'm sort of drawn to the things that I've kind of always loved. That's what I tell about it.
I love that. I love that you have, what you're interested in now is still anchored in what you started out with as a kid, because that's pretty rare. I mean, I know for me, my corporate career particularly was completely different than anything. And I, A, expected it to be, or B, really was even interested in as a child. So it's kind of interesting that you've done that. Now I've gone back to it because now I'm writing and doing things. So I had to kind of go through a corporate career and come out of it and come back to that. So it's awesome that you've been able to weave those passions through your career.
Yeah.
So leadership. Tell me about, as a scientist, we always think about scientists in their lab coats and as introverts in the lab working away, and that doesn't always translate into leadership. Those technical skills don't always translate into leadership. So how does that look for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're unrelated, honestly. The way I think about it is I am a classically trained scientist. So I went to graduate school and got a PhD in biology. So I've been trained in how to do science. Day to day, I don't do science anymore. So I have an amazing VP of R&D and a great technical team, and they do the science. I do more leadership things. I think, humans have a lot of talents, right? Like some of us have really analytical brains that allow us to do science. And some of us also have this like will to lead and create in the world, which allow us to be good leaders. And if you have both, you can do that in a technical field. So I think it's just really the multidimensionality of people at play. And when you see, subject matter experts that are also like great leaders or, super creative, like those are all different pieces of their personality coming together to sort of be amazing in a role.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I've always had, both this left brain and right brain and been able to integrate both. And I think a lot of great leaders really do. You've got to have both ends of the spectrum. But so many people just put on that, I know I was raised, put on that hyper rational, everything has to be rational, everything has to be, in a box, which science does that. And I mean, that's my father was a doctor. So he was, I was sort of raised in that scientific world. And so allowing our creativity to come out is so powerful, particularly in leadership. You seem to do it naturally, right? And you don't really think about it, or do you do things to cultivate your creativity?
Oh, yeah. I unlocked my creativity at work, I would say maybe only 4 years ago when I joined Sci-Fi Foods. I think I finally found a role that really made use of my talents. And all of a sudden, I could start taking my energy away from anxiety and figuring out why I wasn't doing what I wanted to or getting where I wanted to and being frustrated to actually doing meaningful work. And so that was like a huge unlock, right? So I'm using 99% of my brain to do cool, interesting stuff that I'm passionate about or I feel deeply about interpersonally, as opposed to using like 50% of my brain wondering what's wrong with corporate America and why can't I be happy? What did I do wrong? So that was a huge unlock. And then in the role, really learning what it means to be a successful executive, which really does mean being able to be creative and find a solution to a problem. It doesn't mean grinding away at your laptop for 20 hours a day. And I used to grind away and work so hard, but it was all sort of busy work and low value work, which sapped me of my energy and prevented me from like expressing my natural creativity. And so the real change happened when I got into a role that was perfect for me. So I stopped worrying about stuff that was irrelevant. And then I also got to learn how to be successful in that role by resting, by feeding my soul, by working in a sustainable way and actually allowing creativity to manifest. So that's the secret. Stop working so hard.
It is absolutely the secret to stop working so hard. So did you just wake up one morning and start to do that? How did you get to that place?
I'm analytical. So I started my role and I have amazing co-founder and CEO, Josh March. And he's a young person. So he's still under 40, but he's been leading companies in that role for a long time. And I looked at him and I said, this person is successful in this kind of executive role. What is he doing and how's it different from what I'm doing? And we were doing completely different things in terms of how we lived our lives, what we spent time on, how we, prioritized, what kind of networking we did. Everything was completely different. And so, I made the small leap of logic. Well, like if he's doing these things and he's successful, these things are probably making him successful. And unless I adopt them as well, I'm not going to be successful in this role. And so I think that desire to be successful and to be good at it gave me the ability to take the risk and just try doing things a different way. And it turns out I did, and it just feels so much better. And I just feel the impact that I can have without grinding is just so much bigger and more impactful than the previous way I used to work.
So what are the 3 biggest changes that you made?
3 biggest changes that I made. I rest at home. So I turn off my laptop on the weekends and many evenings. So in general, I just try not to work at home when I'm done working. I just don't think like that it's just not restful, basically. I don't get time to recharge. And so that's a problem. Second, I started really aggressive stress management by exercising a ton and also eating well and cutting out caffeine and cutting out alcohol. It's like all that stuff that's bad for your body that if you're in an executive role that's super high pressure, high stress, will kill you. So like the only way to survive that role is to be like really on it in terms of physical self-care. So that's a huge difference. And then I would say networking. I see my job as much more external, and I see taking time to connect with people, even if it's not like literally related to the work we do today. It's really important for us across many dimensions to build these networks, because ultimately like the relationships of people are kind of what drives your life and success. And so making the space and prioritizing networking, not thinking that it's a waste of time or unpleasant, but really being like, oh, this is like a great opportunity. And I get so much energy from networking events now, like meeting the smart humans of Silicon Valley, like working on the future. Every time I go to a networking event, I'm just like so thankful that I got to meet another really interesting person who's so passionate about something that, slightly different than what I'm passionate about. But yeah, it's really like, it gives me a lot of energy.
That's really cool. Speaking for myself, I'm an introvert. So I always like I used to hesitate about networking, right? But it is amazing if you network strategically and with curiosity. And I love curiosity as a starting point. With curiosity, it's like, oh, okay, cool. Like our interview today. Okay, cool. We get to have a conversation. We've never, met before, at least in person, but it's so fascinating to hear other people's stories and to be curious about it. And so, for me, curiosity has been a big shift in how I approach things versus, I think a lot of executive roles, and I know the role that I was in before was, you're supposed to have all the answers. And so being curious I'm not saying it's downplayed, but it doesn't get as much attention as I think it could in a lot of executive roles.
I think you're totally right. And that's kind of an unusual way we run Sci-Fi Foods. So Josh and I are the co-founders, but we don't walk around acting like we have all the answers. We welcome our leadership team to bring answers in their area of subject matter expertise. And then we acknowledge that we're working to solve really complicated problems with ambiguous information. And that we're very clear about how we're doing the process and talk about how we're thinking about it, but just don't, represent any sort of certainty, which I do think is unusual, because you're right. Leadership in Western culture is a lot about this false portrayal that all the answers and you're just going to tell everyone what to do. And like, clearly that doesn't get the best outcome. So we just, we really care more about the outcome than like feeling that we're right. And honestly, it feels so much nicer to, not have to be omniscient, to actually be able to be vulnerable with your humanity and work together with your team to solve problems. Because like we have a hive that works together to get stuff done And not any one of us is like personally responsible for all the outcome. And that's just like so much easier to bear, the burden because it's shared.
Yeah, well, it takes a lot of the stress off of it.
Yeah.
One of the ways that I got around having to know everything in my job was the fact that I always was moving into different departments, and I generally did not know how to do the job of the departments I was moving into, which I think is kind of where you are, right? You've moved into a job where you don't necessarily know how to do the job of all the people around you. And that in itself is so freeing because you don't have, you can't possibly know all the answers because you can't possibly know all the details. That is incredibly freeing. I love that you take the time to take downtime during the weekends and at nights. We are so connected to our devices all the time, and so many companies have that expectation. But the fact that you're doing it and your co-founder is probably doing it too, since you copied it from him, then that actually gives other people in your organization permission to do that too.
Oh yeah, we have a onboarding doc that makes it very clear that like most of the team is like, you're on call during working hours. Otherwise, feel free to respond to your email or Slack messages wherever you want. And even among the leadership team, like I would say once a year I get a call because of an emergency, which is like a true emergency, or vice versa. And when we make that call, no one's upset about it because they know it's like truly extraordinary. Like something's happening and you need me, great. But yeah, I just don't subscribe to that 24/7 always on communication culture. I just don't think it doesn't have any positive results. It's just incentivizing the wrong behavior.
Yeah, and it just adds to the stress, to your point. And stress is such a big problem in today's society, from the top to the bottom of the ladder. I don't think it matters. I mean, the anxiety, the stress, the levels are higher than they've ever been. And so as leaders, if we can not only manage our own stress, but model the behavior that helps reduce the stress, it just changes the whole story, right? It just changes every single thing about it.
Absolutely.
You've mentioned a couple of words. Actually, you've mentioned all three of the words that I had written down to talk to you about as far as how it impacts your future, because clearly it's impacting your job now. And you're in a growing organization, one that's changing. So it sounds like you're going to, your plan is probably to be there for a while. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's useful. I'll be here.
Absolutely. So you mentioned three words: passion, creativity, and impact. All three of those words, which were the words I had written down for you to talk about how that impacts your future. It's clearly, from what you've said, changed the way you're looking at your job now versus the way you've looked at previous jobs. How do you see those carrying you forward into the future?
Yeah, I think, one of the ideas that me and my co-founder kind of talk about as we look forward to the opportunity to continue to scale our business. So we're about 25 people now. We'll be growing in the future. We really love the way the team works today and the culture that we have. And I think for me and him, one of the central questions is, how do we keep this core culture that we have as we scale the business, as we bring in more senior execs who bring all the bad habits of corporate America and try to, BlackBerry you at midnight or something, or whatever. Yeah. How do we help, bring in talent? So we've been with the same team for quite a while now. And so we have clear cultural norms. So for me, I think the question would be like, could I have this magical business with 100 people or 1,000 people? And so if I can repeat this magic trick that we have today at around 25 and keep it at 100 and keep it at 1,000, I'd be really proud of what we created here. Because it's easier to do it in a small company, although it is not easy. If you look around at small companies and startups, most of them are wildly dysfunctional. But in terms of logistics and the number of people you need to get on board, 25 is pretty small. But yeah, I think the question is, how do we keep that going as the organization scales? And so I think that's a question that I have for myself and for Sci-Fi Foods, I don't know if this confidence is, founded, but I feel really confident that we can. Mostly because we're really aware of the typical trajectories of what happens. And we also know what's at stake. Like, we've been able to make fantastic progress on cultivated meat with less funding and less staff than any cultivated meat company out there because of the way we run our business. And so what's at stake is if we don't continue running our business this way, we're sort of jeopardizing commercialization of cultivated meat, which is a thing that can really have a huge impact on the planet and sustainability of agriculture. So it's really important. There's a lot at stake at keeping this high functioning culture going. And I feel confident because we understand what's at stake, that we're going to do the work. We understand its work, and we really understand that there's a lot of, mistakes along the way. And that's something that we found creating the culture that we have today. We made a ton of mistakes, and we continue to make a ton of mistakes. But really, like, we're willing to identify them and understand how we can do it better next time.
Well, if you don't play the shame and blame game, right? You know,
we don't at all.
When you make mistakes, it's okay to say, hey, we made a mistake. What can we learn from it? What can we do differently? Or, obviously, if you keep making the same mistakes over and over again, or someone does, that's a totally different story.
That's a performance with you.
But so many situations where people just say, okay, what went wrong and who to blame and how can we hold accountable? And, accountability, that's such an interesting word.
Around blamability, is that what they really mean?
Yes. I love that.
And it's the system, right? Like, that is what is to blame, is the system. And everyone plays a part in that system. We do not play the blame game ever. And we do a lot of high stakes, high pressure milestones and critical experiments. And the entire team feels safe when those go sideways because they understand we will all respond with equanimity and really, as a team, pursue the work to actually get the outcome we want without focusing on blaming individuals. That's a great cat.
Yes, he wants to come and join the conversation. Yeah, always wants to come and join the conversation.
It's so fun getting new executives on our team because we have to convince them they're not going to get in trouble. So it usually takes 6 months. I'm just I've ever seen anyone get in trouble? Anything.
Which is really interesting. And I think that was one of the questions I was going to ask you. So as you build out the team, and you have to bring other people in, is it you hiring the right people? I mean, there's always an element to that, right? But is the bigger focus hiring the right people or teaching the people once you get them in? Or does it have to be both?
We can only teach people who are willing to learn. Yes. It's the thing. So we have to hire subject matter experts that have profound experience in what they're doing. They're going to come with their own work experiences and what I'll call baggage. And that's undeniable. But I think the question is, can we predict which of those people is really open and hungry for a different way of working? Because we're happy to do the work to show them the benefit of how we run things at Sci-Fi Foods, what it gets for them, what it gets in terms of outcomes. We are infinitely patient. We can do that work. But some people just don't want to. And I think, that's been sort of the biggest challenge is in the interview process, trying to figure out who those people are, who's most likely to actually be open to a new way of doing stuff. And we have hypotheses that we formulated about how to predict that.
Okay.
Do you want to hear those?
I would love to.
So we work at a startup company, and we're often interviewing people who come from larger companies. So our theory is that if you're really successful in a larger company, you just love everything about it, and now you just want to make the next jump in your career and have a bigger impact to a small company, you are doomed. We want the people who are frustrated with life in a big company, or they just feel there's something tremendously missing, or they're not notionally they're successful, they can do it, but it just doesn't feel right to them. And the hypothesis is that those people are actually willing and open to doing this new thing. But if you were a rock star and you thought corporate America was perfect, I'm really concerned that when you get here, it's going to be too hard to understand why we need to do things differently. And it just will feel too wrong and it will be possible.
That totally makes sense. Because you need people that are willing to look at things differently. And that's sometimes really hard to predict. And often the people that are the most successful often have the hardest time changing because they feel like, okay, I've done all this in my life. This whole thing is work. And maybe it's mentally
because I'm right. I'm always right. And that's why I'm successful.
Right. Or I've done it this way and it's been successful.
Yeah.
So even if they want to change, I find this really fascinating. A lot of people say, I want to change, but they find it so hard to let go of everything that they think worked in the past. Because maybe, it probably did work in the past in a different environment.
But somewhere else.
But at what cost? I mean, you talk about the cost of, your career up until, 4 years ago when you landed at Sci-Fi Foods.
I was healthy and stressed out and really angry at everyone and like trapped in my life. Yeah.
Yeah. And so many women get to that point. I mean, I was that way I can't say I was angry, but I certainly got to the point in my career where it's like, this isn't working for me anymore. I don't feel like I can be fully myself. I don't feel like I can express myself. I feel like there's just something missing in my life. And so, 5 years ago, obviously I don't have the subject matter expertise that you need, but like I would have been a great person for you to be hiring based on your theory, because I'm like, this isn't working anymore. I need to do something different with my life.
Yeah.
But sometimes even when people say that and really mean it, even then, sometimes it's like, this has always worked. So do I really have to let go of it? Well, that's the part that's probably hard to predict.
It is, but it's just a fact of life, right? It's up to our talented employees to figure out how to be successful in their roles. And obviously we all want to help, but ultimately that burden is not on me or Josh or their manager. It's on them. Like also how I feel about my role. Like it's not my CEO and co-founder's job to make sure I'm successful in my role. It is my job to figure out how to do it. And then I just extend everyone that same responsibility.
Which is awesome. Which is such a refreshing approach to it. And I love that you've been able to take all that stuff. I mean, you're totally a success story for the type of transformation that, I love to work with women on. Because you get to that point where you're frustrated and angry and resentful and whatever, and you've taken the opportunity to make the change and create.
Do everything different, and if you do everything different, everything will be different.
Yes, my favorite saying was always at work. Even when I was at work, I would always say, hey, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, right?
Exactly.
We always say that, but we have to do things.
People feel trapped, though. There's this weird feeling that there's a fear if they change something, the world will collapse. I don't know. Yeah, I think, I'm curious what gives people the internal motivation to push through that fear, because I basically found that on the other side of every fear and taboo and social narrative that I've had to break through is absolutely nothing. It's just not there, but it feels like a wall until you kind of push through it and you're like, wait a minute, there was no wall. It's just it's fine, and I'm fine, and I kind of feel better. Great.
I love that, because you're absolutely right. And I think what people are most afraid of is themselves. They don't know who they are, right? I don't know who I am without all of those ways that I defined myself before.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I had the conversation on my last interview that I did. I had the conversation with the person I was interviewing, and she was saying she had to step away from her career at one point because her child was ill and she couldn't work. She had to stay home, and she said it was really just a complete identity crisis for her, because she did not know who she was without the role, without the title, without the salary, without all the trappings that we think make define us. And they really don't define us, but we sort of get attached to them and we think they define us.
Yeah.
So it was a real transformation for her to go through the process of, letting go of all of those labels in order to really be herself. And even though you have a label, you have a title, you have a big role.
I do today. I work at a startup company. Anything can happen tomorrow.
Which is great. And you never hear of startup companies. Everybody always talks about startup companies as working 24/7 and everybody's on call and everything's a fire drill. And you guys are approaching it totally differently.
We work hard. Yeah, no, we work hard in our own way, but we get stuff done. And yeah, we're really proud of the progress we've made. And I just don't think it would have been possible doing it the traditional grinded out way.
Well, there's a way of working with ease and flow when you're rested, when you're, in a good place, when you're not stressed out, you're in a positive, I work with a lot of people on something called positive intelligence. And it's really about being in that ease and flow state of allowing things to pull you instead of pushing all the time.
Yeah.
And you've clearly created a space where you are allowing everything to pull you, which means you work much more efficiently. I know this. I mean, it's like writing a book. I work much more efficiently if I'm just in a flow rather than I'm just sitting there staring at a page and trying to make something happen. Because
the other day, my co-founder and I were working on talking points for a new presentation that we had. And I was staring at the page doing this. I'm like, I can't do this right now, Josh. Why don't we go for a walk? So we just went outside and did a nice 15-minute walk in the Walmart parking lot. Because that's what we do in the afternoons to get a little energy. But just, it's my energy's not here right now. Can I find another moment where I can knock this out really quickly? Why would I spend 2 hours doing it now where it's nails on a chalkboard and the outcome is crap? Whereas my creativity is not flowing. So I need to do something else. And then, we got it done. It was great.
100%. And I love that you allow yourself time for that, because so many people, think, okay, if you're not locked at your desk, right? If you're not sitting at your desk, if you're not hands on keyboards, blah, 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 then you're not working. Well,
what are you doing with your hands on the keyboard? That's so...
Believe me, I get it. I always did my best work. I always do my best work if I can walk away from it first and allow it to kind of come and be in my head. And then I can sit down at the keyboard and work. But if I'm just trying to sit down, if I don't have it already sort of there, there's no point in me being at the keyboard.
This is why I love sort of all the AI technology coming into the workforce now, because you can use the AI assistants to do really boring stuff that isn't getting responding to an email with these 3 points. You can get ChatGPT to write that email for you instead of spending half an hour with your hands on your keyboard trying to write this email and not adding any value to your life or anybody else's. And now you have more time to create that creative space for yourself and, read an interesting article that's relevant to the work that you do. And all of a sudden helps you synthesize a new point or tell your CEO about some competitive intelligence that you just picked up reading this article. That has so much more value than writing that stupid email.
Very true. Right? Absolutely. No, very true. It makes a lot of sense. There are so many other ways that we can move forward today. And to your point, technology has changed that.
I think it's going to make that wonderful human creativity, insight, and synthesis just so much more important. It'll be even more important to focus on the things that we're wonderful at as humans when there's more technology that helps take care of this kind of menial stuff that nobody enjoys.
Absolutely. As long as people give themselves the space away from the technology to have the creativity. Take the walks, do the yoga, do whatever, work out, to your point, whatever it is that you have to physically
do yourself. 4 days a week, I have to, because I won't survive the stress of being an executive if I do not. And anytime I coach women who are startup founders and they're getting into a tricky period, I'm like, so tell me the 3 things you're going to do to actively fight stress every day. What's your survival plan? I need to hear what your plan is, because if you do nothing and you just work harder, you will die. And that's not going to help you win. So if you want to win, let's think about, ways to get there.
Yeah, you won't be able to win because you'll get sick. To your point, you'll get sick. You'll have a breakdown. I mean, I know so many women, have had to leave the workforce because they've had, fibromyalgia or adrenaline fatigue or something even more serious than that. And that's because the stress manifests itself, at some point your body's like, I cannot do this anymore. So taking care of your health is absolutely 100%. I love that you're doing that. So obviously that would be, I was going to ask you what your one piece of advice would be, but that clearly that's a big piece of your advice is to manage stress. I guess the one other thing I'd like to ask you just in closing is what made you take the leap of looking at Josh, looking at his life, and then saying, I'm going to make these changes. What made you do that?
Ambition. I want to be successful.
Okay.
I want, yeah. And that to truly be successful, it means you have to be open-minded and analytical and understand the game you're playing and how it's possible to win. So I was just not willing to lose. And I was pretty sure if I kept doing the stuff I used to do, I was clearly going to lose at the role. And I wanted to be successful in it. I didn't accidentally know that my life would be transformed into something completely lovely and just sublime in general. In the process, I didn't know that was possible. I was just motivated by ambition and winning at this personal goal, which is like, hey, I've always wanted a leadership role. What would it look like to be so good at it? And that gave me enough, courage to try something radical. But yeah, on the other side of it is just like a completely different way of living. And I don't think I'll ever be the same again, in the best way possible.
Absolutely. No, I love that. And I love that you are describing your life as sublime. Not many people do that. So congratulations on that. That's awesome.
What a miss. That's like the best part of being human.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. I mean, life is absolutely sublime, but there's not many people that describe their lives that way. So
they're all sitting on their, chained to their desk with their hands on their keyboard, and you're not going to get there. The sublime is not found on your keyboard. It's just not. Not like from the computer.
Unless you're in the flow.
Or okay. I'll say there are edge cases, yes, but not reading your emails or scrolling through social media.
No. I mean, for me, life can be sublime when I've got a really great story going for one of my fiction books, because I write fiction about women executives. So if I got a really great story going and I'm really excited about what's going on, then a sublime is absolutely important.
You need to get out of, you have to get out of the ordinary, day-to-day banal space. That's not where it's found. So how do you free yourself to do that?
Yeah, and you've got to step away, which is why I love about not being in corporate at all anymore, is because that way I can step away and go out for a walk.
I am in corporate America, and I can still do it too. So I think it's actually possible. It's
it is.
Possible.
It is possible.
Everyone.
It is possible and aspirational.
But possible.
Absolutely, 100%. So what's next for you after Sci-Fi Foods, or you haven't even thought that far ahead?
There's a lot to do with Sci-Fi Foods. So I don't have a what's next, but I do think keeping up with the growth of the company and continuing to be an excellent executive for larger orgs would be a fantastic challenge. And then, I have a lot that I want to do in my personal life. I'm recently divorced, and that's been a huge opportunity to sort of rethink my personal life and happiness at home. And I'm really enjoying exploring that freedom of creating a life that I really want to live personally as well, and with my son. So I'm really excited about, exploring that space with freedom and curiosity.
I love that. Two of my favorite words, freedom and curiosity. So you have the whole world open to you. You got this company. You guys have the whole world before you. You've got this company. You've got a new personal life.
I think we all have the whole world in front of us.
We do, but not many people.
Some of us see it.
Other people see it. But clearly, There's so many opportunities, and the world is full of opportunities and possibilities. And I love that you are embracing them. So thank you so much for sharing. I am very inspired by your story today. So
thank you. It was fun talking to you.
I'm sure our listeners will be too. So thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Kasia Gora, on another episode of Daring to Transcend. Don't forget to follow the channel to make sure you don't miss any of the episodes. Take care.